communicating with their employees. 70% of leaders feel uncomfortable just talking to their employees. And worse, 40%, which is basically half. Well, 40%, it's a hop, skip, and a jump to 50%. 40% of leaders are uncomfortable engaging in direct feedback about performance with their employees. So today, on this episode 31, I'm going to be demystifying crucial conversations. Let's get into it. Welcome to Leadership Untitled with Kareen Turner. That is me. I am a leadership development expert and executive coach. And today, as I shared, I'm diving into crucial conversations. I had actually almost written all of my notes for the podcast today for this episode. And I thought, let's go out and see and find some research to back up some of what I'm sharing. I truly was appalled by those numbers. 70%. I have to keep repeating it. 70% of leaders are uncomfortable just talking to their employees. And 40%, which as I said, is just a hop, skip, and jump away from 50%, don't like giving direct feedback on performance, which is I'm just looking over here to make sure I'm all muted everywhere else, which is disastrous. And I have seen these percentages played out in my own experiences. I have seen and heard it played out in others. My clients have shared it. So I absolutely believe those numbers. As I saw the 70% especially, I had so many images come to mind or experiences come to mind where, you're walking by a leader in the hallway of the organization, and you can tell that they're doing their best to figure out, do I say hi? Do I say good morning? And it ends up being like a mumble as they're passing by. And I truly feel sorry for those leaders who are uncomfortable, which is the majority, because that's where you spend the bulk of your week is work. And if you're feeling uncomfortable, just even interacting with those who are doing the work to support you, that is not an exciting existence. It is not an incredible thing to want to walk into every single day. So, enough about me lamenting about those numbers. What are we going to do about it? I specifically use the word demystifying because I do believe we have built up that, crucial conversation, high stakes conversation. And I can understand how that can get the tummy rumbling, the cortisol levels shooting up, heart pounding, headaches, where it's just, I'll deal with it later or I won't deal with it at all. I can understand. I also understand that there's a concern about the potential drama, the potential controversy. We, however, always jump to the negative conclusion. We always think of the worst case scenario. And the problem is whether we do end up being in the worst case scenario where a team member, or if you're having a constructive feedback with a colleague or even your leader, even if it does turn out to be the worst case scenario, it's still part of our leadership responsibility. It is part of our job duty. It is part of our requirement of showing up and having the ability, the privilege to lead. More importantly, it is a gift. It is an absolute gift to your team member when you demonstrate to them that you respect them and that you are honest with them. There is so much, for lack of a better word, BS that you have to cut through in a corporate environment. You're looking at an email, dissecting it and wondering, does that period mean something? Does the exclamation mark mean something? Why did they split up the sentence there? We're trying to add meaning to interactions, to communication, to just survive, and it's exhausting. And so when you give your employee the gift, when you give your colleague and even your leader, yes, your leader, the gift of being honest and cutting through that BS and just, this is the way it is. This is what I'm thinking. Let's talk about it. Wow, you have released so much stress. And I know it sounds counterintuitive to say constructive feedback is a gift to a team member and it helps to relieve stress. But if you have ever been in that situation, I want you to be honest. Yes, it was painful, likely. We've all been there, have areas to improve, and hopefully you had the gift of someone sharing with you how you can improve. It's painful, it's uncomfortable, but if you think about it now, and I want you to be honest, and it's okay if you're just like, "No, I don't agree with you, Karen," that's fine. But the bulk of people who I know, and through my career, the number of team members who have said, "Thank you." I was going to say who have shared their thanks with me, who have said thank you for taking the time to give them feedback, to be honest with them, has far outweighed the situations where anyone flew off the handle. And for the record, that has never happened to me in my career. I've had people upset for sure. I've had team members cry for sure, but I've never had anyone lose their cool or lose it, any drama or controversy around it. When you hold back on honest and tough conversations, you're doing a disservice to yourself, to your organization. And if you are the CEO, the founder, you're doing a disservice to your own company that you are trying to build and be successful. Right off the jump, I don't have a magic trick for this one, other than to say you're going to have to just do it and practice it. But I will offer you, of course, some strategies that you can use to make the process feel less daunting. I used to be that person who despised confrontation. Growing up, I avoided it. That's what I did. Into my work life, I avoided it. When I moved into leadership, it was an immediate stop. I saw how leaders not addressing issues timely or at all caused a direct negative effect, a systemic negative effect in the work environment. I saw it with senior leadership teams not having required necessary conversations with the middle management and how that festered. And then I saw how when I didn't have conversations that were timely or I avoided them, when I first moved into leadership, I could see the direct result of my lack of action. And the issue with that is that you're centering on yourself. Even if you're going to tell me, well, no, it's not about me. I just don't want to hurt feelings. I don't want to have anyone feel uncomfortable. It's still about you. You're making an assumption on behalf of a team member how they're going to react. And then from that assumption, you're saying you're going to feel uncomfortable. You're leading with ego, and it's destructive and can become ugly, especially if you recognize this behavior. I've even heard leaders in public expound on the fact that they feel that their team members should know how they feel. They should know that they're unhappy with them. They should know that they're not happy with their performance. That is a fresh set of BS. And here's the problem. As a leader and as an employee, there's a power dynamic there. And when you as a leader abdicate your responsibility of giving feedback, be giving constructive feedback, You are placing the entire burden of managing an already complex dynamic, a power dynamic, and having to interpret and be a mind reader for how you're feeling. That you don't have to be a mind reader. You don't have to be a fortune teller to understand that that leads to environments that are disconnected, unproductive, and incredibly toxic. And why toxic? Because there's no honesty. And even if you're holding back feedback from just one person, one, that's horrible. But if you think that it doesn't impact the rest of the team and that the rest of the team doesn't know, the rest of the team doesn't feel it, where there is no honesty, there is there are lies, and lies fester and create a toxic concoction. So you can fool yourself, you can say what you want to say, you can say that they should know, you can say that you don't want to hurt their feelings, but at the end of the day, you're creating an environment that is disconnected, unproductive, and toxic. As I was preparing these notes, I actually remembered two distinct conversations that I had with two CEOs, and they were so different and actually illustrate the point that I'm trying to make perfectly. So I'm going to share them. The first one was with a CEO, and in both conversations, I shared basically the same, we had the same type of conversation. I shared how I was feeling, provided some examples, and then asked if I misinterpreted the situation. So the first CEO just outright lied to me. I could see it on their face. I could see it in their eyes. I heard it in their voice. I saw it in their body language. It was an out and out lie. Nothing's wrong. Everything's fine. No, nothing's going on. I knew it. And you also know when you are being lied to. Your team members know when they are being lied to. You know what the result was? I immediately knew that this was no longer the place for me to work. Not because I was afraid of receiving constructive, direct feedback, bad quote and unquote feedback. I don't consider any feedback bad unless it's built off of lies, but that's a different conversation. I'm not afraid to receive feedback. It was that I could no longer trust this person and I could no longer respect them. I completely lost respect for this CEO. And that's just not a productive environment for me. I, like probably 99% of the workforce, thrives on feedback, constructive feedback, positive feedback, just any feedback to help calibrate and to have an understanding of how I am contributing. If your team member is choosing to spend 40 plus hours a week for your success, whether it's for your team's success as part of a larger organization or for your own company, then you have to be committed to share with them because it is a give and take situation. And if you are routinely running through team members, they're leaving, your turnover is high, you are spending so much money and time, resources across the board, retraining, rehiring, retraining, going through a cycle. And one of the best ways to stop that cycle is to be sure that you are giving meaningful and intentional feedback at regular routines, at regular intervals, not just that 1 year annual performance. And hopefully you are even doing the bare minimum of an annual performance. So not surprisingly, I did leave that role. In the second situation, the second example, as I shared, very similar. This is how I'm feeling. Here are some examples. Have I misinterpreted the situation? I'd love to talk to you about it. This CEO was thoughtful and truthful in his response. I could, of course, see it in their eyes, their voice, their body language. They were fully engaged in the conversation. And in this case, it was a time of transition. There was a whole bunch of other stuff going on. And This CEO shared with me what was happening that may have led to me feeling that way, or an interaction between us that had gone a certain way. They provided specific responses to my question. And not only that, as the CEO, this person took the opportunity to ask me, what did how did I want to grow in the organization? And also shared specific feedback about how my performance was. And I will tell you, this CEO I did not report to directly. I had let the person who I reported to directly know that I was going to have this conversation. So, to again increase trust and to be transparent. And the fact that this CEO took time to have that conversation with me, to share feedback on performance that I wasn't even aware of that they knew, I felt seen and I felt heard. And I stayed with that organization for quite a number of years. And I still count to this day that leader, that CEO, as a trusted advisor. So, how do you, as a leader, take the lead to create functional, productive, safe spaces for your team members to feel respected? So, bonus one is to be sure that you are leaving space for questions. Okay, so the bonus tip actually will be planning. We'll call it planning. Bonus tip is to plan, especially if you are new to the game of showing up consistently and dedicating yourself to sharing transparent and honest, respectful feedback. Plan. What are you going to address? And it's okay for you to write it down. You guys can see my pages flipping. I have notes. You have notes. It's okay. We're all human. Write it down. Write down, bullet out your key points that you want to address. You don't want to have more than truly two, max three, if they're all related. If they're different subject matter, I think it's fair to have different conversations about them and to let the employee know, let's address these first, because you don't want to overwhelm your team member or your colleague or even your leader if you're having this conversation. So I want you to plan it out. You've got your 2 or 3 bullet points that you want to address, then what questions you're going to ask, or leaving space for questions, leaving space to listen, and then what does success look like? I don't want you to just think about, well, I want the employee's behavior to change, or I want my colleague's behavior to change, or I want my leader to do something different. That's important. That's more of what are the expectations and what are your expectations? What do you desire to change? And that you should also document. What I'm talking about is, what does success look like? I want you to focus on relationship. How, at the end of this conversation, do you want your team member to feel? How do you want to feel? How do you want your relationship to be? And if you keep that as your focus, it will guide the tone of the conversation. As you're scheduling it, I don't want you to try and schedule what should be a 60-minute conversation into a 30-minute meeting, or worse, a 30-minute conversation into a 15-minute meeting. Be sure that you have allotted enough time for conversation. First, plan. 2, address issues early. If you have been listening to the Leadership Untitled podcast, then you know in episode 9, and if you haven't listened to it or want to re-listen to it, I talk about how to measure productivity meaningfully. And in that, I give you a structure to have in place that allows you to have conversations, that creates conversations organically by having them on your schedule and calendared. But you have that structure in place where you can quickly, easily, casually bring up issues early before they develop into anything else. You can bring up and address potential miscommunications. You can nip things in the bud. That's the easiest way to say it. So go back and listen to that episode, re-listen to it, episode 9, to create a structure where you have meetings in place, quick meetings in place that make this bullet point to address an issue early easier. 2, no matter the context, be direct. Be direct. I do not like the sandwich method of critique. It confuses the employee, it confuses the situation, and truly, it doesn't place trust at your employee or respect that your employee will be able to handle the constructive feedback. You're doing so well, you're doing incredible. Here's one thing that you could change, but you're so awesome and incredible. That is confusing. And it also doesn't allow the follow up conversation as to how they could fix that issue. So I want you to trust your employee enough to allow them to be able to sit in your constructive feedback. So be direct, dump the sandwich method. It's okay to praise your team member. Absolutely. But if that's the only time you're doing it, then that's disingenuous. But it just confuses and muddies the water. If you're having a conversation about performance and you want to address something specific, be direct and give your employee the respect that they can handle you being direct in a non judgmental and in a non shaming way. 3, give space to speak. So you've shared the areas that you have concern with. Give them space to respond and for you to listen. And in response, they may actually share with you areas that you have contributed to the issues that you're talking about. And this is what I mean about needing to, as a leader, practice being in the mindset of not jumping to conclusions, not jumping in, but listening. And also you sitting in that constructive feedback. Because here's the thing, in a corporate space, no matter how siloed we think we are, all of our work touches everybody else's work. There are very few things that happen in a vacuum. And so chances are there are other teams, other people that are contributing to a performance issue, and you may be one of them. So be prepared to hear that and be prepared to just take a deep breath and continue listening and giving space for that person to speak. And then lastly, you're going to leave with a clear plan. So when you were planning as step 1, I think my numbers got off a little bit, but as you were planning in step 1, you thought about what does success look like, and you probably jotted down some expectations. This is where you're going to create a plan that you both agree to. So, what are the expectations to correct the issue? What is a timeline, the specific timeline that you want to begin to see progress in? How will you support them? And when will there be a follow up meeting? If it's with a colleague or if it's not about performance, about miscommunication, maybe the commitment, the plan of action is to continue to have conversations that if I feel like, oh, that email felt a little salty, I'm going to go talk to you about it. And that's the commitment that you make to be transparent, to be trusting of each other, to have these conversations and not let things fester. But no matter what, you want to close out with a plan. Most importantly, I want you to be respectful in the conversation, to lead with respect, to be fully engaged because you are creating a bridge, a connection. You are helping to build relationship. So 1, just to be sure we're all on the same page, you want to plan out the conversation. 2, you want to address issues early. 3, you want to be direct no matter what. 4, you want to give space to speak. And 5, you want to leave with a clear plan of action. Crucial conversations are some of the hardest parts of leadership, but hopefully those 5 steps are going to be the starting place to how you can lead courageously so that you're creating an intentional environment that is an intentional culture that is open with its communication and also one that fosters growth. Thank you for joining today's episode of Leadership Untitled with Kareen Turner. If you want to learn more about my services, visit leadershipuntitledinstitute.com. And if you found value in today's episode, share it. Together, we are going to decrease that 70% and that 40% to zero. So we have greater communication, greater productivity, greater respect, and decreasing the number of toxic environments in corporate America. So, again, thank you for being here today. Have a good one.